I dialed Michael's number the moment I walked out of the plant for the last time. 37 years of grease-stained uniforms and overtime shifts were finally behind me. I wanted to share this with my son first, before anyone else. The phone rang once, then nothing. I tried again. This time, a message appeared on my screen. "This number is blocked." I stared at those words until they blurred. My hands went cold despite the August heat. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to understand what I was seeing. Michael had blocked me. No warning, no argument, just silence. I'd missed things over the years, sure. Birthdays, games, school events. But I'd provided everything he needed. I thought he understood that sacrifice. I thought we had time to fix the distance between us now that I was finally free. The retirement party inside was still going, people laughing and eating cake I'd barely touched. I started the engine and drove home, the celebration forgotten behind me. Denise was in the kitchen when I got home, scrolling through her phone. I told her about Michael blocking my number. She looked up for maybe 3 seconds, then back at her screen. "That's odd," she said flatly. No concern in her voice, no surprise. Just those 2 words, delivered like she was commenting on the weather. I waited for more, for questions, for the worry a mother should feel when her son cuts off his father. Nothing came. She stood up, poured herself wine, and walked to the living room without another word. I followed her, needing something more than indifference. "Denise, our son blocked me. Doesn't that concern you?" She sipped her wine slowly. "Maybe he needs space, Troy. You've been pretty distant his whole life." The words hit like a slap. Not the content, but the rehearsed way she said them. Like she'd been practicing that line, waiting for the right moment to use it. I stood there watching her pretend to care about whatever was on TV. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying the years, trying to find where things went wrong. The double shifts when Michael was in elementary school. The weekends at the plant when he had soccer games. The Christmas I worked through, because holiday pay meant a better bonus. I told myself it was temporary, that once things stabilized, I'd be there more. But stability never came, or maybe I just kept moving the goalpost. Denise used to complain about my absence. Then she stopped complaining altogether, which should have worried me more than the complaints ever did. I remembered Michael's 8th grade graduation. I promised to be there, even requested the day off. Then the plant had an equipment failure, and they needed someone who knew the old systems. I'd gone in, telling myself it was just a few hours. I missed the whole ceremony. Denise's face when I got home told me I'd crossed some invisible line. 3 days into retirement, I was supposed to feel relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. The house was too quiet during the day. Denise worked from home now, doing medical billing in her office upstairs. I heard her on the phone one afternoon, her voice carrying through the heating vent. "He's driving me crazy already," she said to whoever was listening. "Just moping around like I'm supposed to fix his life now." I moved closer to the vent, my stomach tightening. "I can't wait for this to finally be over," she continued. "Another year, maybe less. Then I can actually breathe again." Her laugh was cold, unfamiliar. I backed away from the vent slowly, my mind racing through what over might mean. Divorce? She'd never mentioned divorce. We barely argued anymore. We barely talked at all, which I'd stupidly mistaken for peace. I spent the rest of that day in the garage, pretending to organize tools I'd already organized twice. I called my sister Rachel that weekend. She lived 2 states away, but kept in touch with Michael through social media. "Have you talked to Michael lately?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel hesitated too long. "Troy, what's going on?" I told her about the block number. She sighed, that particular sound that meant she knew more than she wanted to say. "He thinks you abandoned them," she finally admitted. "Emotionally, I mean. He told me last year that you chose work over family for his entire childhood. That you were never really there, even when you were home." The words felt like accusations I couldn't defend against because they weren't entirely wrong. But the finality in Rachel's voice suggested something deeper. "Did Denise tell him that?" I asked. Another hesitation. "I think she's been telling him that for years, Troy. I think she's made sure that's the only story he knows." I started thinking about every conversation, every parent-teacher conference, every family gathering over the past 2 decades. Denise had always been the interpreter. When Michael was upset, she explained why. When he succeeded, she provided context. I've been grateful for that translation because I never felt fluent in my own son's language. Now I understood what she'd really been doing. She was controlling the narrative. Every time I worked late, she told Michael I chose work over him. Every missed event became evidence of my priorities. Every sacrifice I made to keep us financially stable was reframed as abandonment. And I trusted her to speak fairly about me because that's what married people do. They protect each other's reputation, especially to their children. But Denise hadn't been protecting me. She'd been systematically erasing me, replacing the father I tried to be with a villain of her own creation. By the time Michael was old enough to form his own opinions, the story was already written. The plan threw me a small retirement party on my last official day. Cake from the grocery store, a plaque nobody would remember in a week, handshakes from guys I'd worked beside for decades. I'd mentioned it to Denise that morning, asking if she'd stop by since it was just down the road. "I've got calls scheduled all afternoon," she said without looking up. You understand. I did understand, just not in the way she meant. At the party, Kent Patterson made a joke about wives being happy when husbands retire because they finally have someone to boss around full-time. Everyone laughed. Kent worked in quality control, been there almost as long as me. We'd had beers together, talked about kids and mortgages and getting old. When the others drifted away, Kent stayed close, asking about my plans. "Denise must be thrilled to have you home," he said, his smile just a bit too knowing. I nodded, but something about the way he said her name made my chest tighten. After the party, I was packing my locker when Jackson approached. He was younger, maybe 40, worked maintenance on the night shift. We weren't close, just nodded in hallways. "Got a minute?" he asked quietly, glancing around to make sure we were alone. I followed him outside to the smoking area, though neither of us smoked. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I don't know if I should say anything, but you've always been decent to me." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" He looked at his boots. "You might want to look closer at what's been going on around here. With your wife, I mean, and Kent." The words hung between us like smoke. I asked him to explain, but he shook his head. "I've said too much already. Just pay attention, man. You deserve better than this." He walked back inside, leaving me standing in the heat with a truth I wasn't ready to face. That night, after Denise went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with our financial statements spread out like evidence. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Jackson's warning was based on gossip or misunderstanding. But I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut anymore. I started with credit card bills. Lunches at restaurants I'd never heard of, always on weekdays, always charged to the card I rarely used. The dates went back 18 months. I cross-referenced them with my old work schedules and found a pattern immediately. Every lunch was on a day I'd worked the early shift when I left the house by 5 a.m. and came home by 3. She'd always been home when I arrived, acting like she'd been working all day. I pulled up phone records next. Hundreds of calls to one number, sometimes 20 in a day, often late at night. I reverse searched the number online. It belonged to Kent Patterson. I called the number at 2 in the morning. Kent answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Denise," he mumbled. I hung up without saying anything. My hands were shaking. I'd known for days, really, but hearing him say her name like that made it undeniable. They'd been having an affair, probably for years. Every late meeting, every girls' night out, every business trip she claimed was mandatory. All lies, carefully constructed while I worked myself half to death to support us. I wanted to storm upstairs and confront her, demand answers, make her admit what she'd done. But something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the survival instinct I developed from years of solving problems methodically at the plant. Emotions cause mistakes. I needed to be smart about this, document everything, understand the full scope before I made any moves. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to an address only I knew. I waited until Saturday morning when Denise was awake and caffeinated. I asked her to sit down. She looked annoyed but complied, checking her phone twice before I even started talking. "I know about Kent," I said quietly. Her face didn't change for several seconds, like she was calculating the best response. Then she set her phone down slowly. "How long have you known?" Not a denial, not an apology. Just logistical curiosity. Long enough, I replied. How long has it been going on? She leaned back, almost relaxed. 3 years, maybe 4. Does it matter? It did matter, but not in the way she thought. Why? I asked. She laughed, short and bitter. Because you were never here, Troy. Even when you were home, you weren't present. Ken actually talks to me. He sees me. I absorb that, trying to find anger, but only feeling empty. And Michael, her expression shifted to something defensive. Michael knows who the real parent was. I made sure of that. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things or make threats. I just stood up and walked to the spare bedroom where I'd been sleeping for the past week. Denise followed me, clearly confused by my calm. That's it, she asked. You're not going to fight for this. I turned to face her. There's nothing to fight for. You destroyed this marriage years ago. I was just too blind to see it. She crossed her arms. So what now? You think you're going to take everything in the divorce? Good luck proving anything. I almost smiled. I don't need luck, Denise. I have phone records, credit card statements, and a very good memory. Her confidence wavered. Over the next week, I moved through the house like a ghost, documenting everything. I photographed valuables, backed up digital files, secured my retirement accounts. I consulted with a lawyer who confirmed what I suspected. Her affair and parental alienation would matter in court, especially regarding asset division and retirement funds. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old books. His name was Mr. Foster, and he'd been practicing family law for 30 years. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he set his pen down. Your wife has been methodically poisoning your son against you while conducting a years-long affair with your coworker, he summarized. In this state, that matters significantly for asset division, especially concerning marital misconduct and retirement benefits. He explained that my pension, earned through decades of work, was technically marital property. But Denise's affair and her role in alienating Michael would weigh heavily in my favor. Document everything, he advised. Every text, every call log, every instance where she undermined her relationship with your son. We'll need it. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months: control. For the first time since retirement, I had a plan. Not revenge, just protection. I was going to rebuild my life, but first I needed to salvage what was left. I found a furnished apartment across town, month-to-month lease, nothing fancy. I moved out on a Tuesday while Denise was at some fabricated meeting. I took my clothes, my tools, and the few things that still felt like mine. I left a note on the kitchen counter, staying elsewhere for a while. Lawyer will be in touch. That was it. No drama, no final confrontation, no begging for another chance. She called 3 hours later, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. You just left? Without even discussing this. I almost laughed. There's nothing to discuss. You made your choices years ago. She tried a different approach, softening her tone. Troy, we can work through this. I made mistakes, but we have history. Don't throw that away. But I wasn't throwing anything away. She'd already done that. I hung up and turned off my phone. The apartment was quiet, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The apartment came with too much empty time. I'd spent 37 years defined by work schedules, shift rotations, overtime demands. Now I had nothing but hours to fill and thoughts to avoid. On my third day alone, I walked past a community center advertising volunteer opportunities. Something about the sign caught my attention: help others rebuild, job training, and support services. I went inside expecting nothing, just killing time. A woman named Carmen ran the place. She explained they helped laid-off workers, people who'd lost manufacturing jobs when plants closed or automated. They offered resume help, interview prep, emotional support. We need volunteers who understand what these folks are going through, she said. Someone who's been in the trenches. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. When can I start? She smiled. How about now? I spent that afternoon helping a 52-year-old man named Marcus update his resume. He'd worked in automotive assembly for 28 years before his plant shut down. He reminded me of myself, minus the betrayal. The center became my new routine. I showed up every morning at 8, stayed until 5, sometimes later. I helped people who'd spent decades doing physical work translate their skills into resume language. I practiced mock interviews with men and women who hadn't applied for a job in 30 years. I listened to their fears about being too old, too specialized, too tired to start over. And somewhere in that work, I found something I'd lost years ago: purpose. People thanked me, not because they had to, not out of obligation, but because I'd actually helped them. A woman named Glenda got hired at a logistics company after I helped her prepare. She came back to the center with cookies, crying happy tears. Marcus landed a maintenance supervisor position. He shook my hand so hard I thought he'd break it. For the first time since Michael blocked my number, I smiled without forcing it. I was useful again. Not just a paycheck or a problem solver, but someone who mattered to people who had no reason to pretend. The divorce papers arrived at the house on a Thursday. Denise called me immediately, her voice shaking with something between rage and disbelief. "You actually filed," she said. Without even trying to fix this, I was at the center, sitting across from a younger guy who'd been laid off from a warehouse job. I stepped outside to take the call. "There's nothing to fix, Denise. You made that clear." She tried to sound reasonable. "We can go to counseling. We can work through the trust issues. Don't throw away 26 years of marriage." But those 26 years were already gone, dissolved in lies and manipulation and a calculated affair. "Sign the papers," I said calmly. "My lawyer will send over the asset division proposal next week." She realized then that I wasn't bluffing, wasn't playing games. This was real. "You're going to regret this, Troy. I'll make sure you lose everything." I hung up before she could finish the threat. Inside, the young guy was waiting, nervous about an interview tomorrow. I went back to helping him prepare. Michael called 3 days later. Not from a blocked number, from Denise's phone. I almost didn't answer. "Dad." His voice was different than I remembered, deeper, harder. "What the hell are you doing?" I sat down slowly. "Hello, Michael. You just abandoned Mom," he said, his words rushed and angry. "After everything she's done for you. She's falling apart, and you don't even care." I wanted to tell him the truth, lay out every piece of evidence, destroy the narrative his mother had built. But he wouldn't hear it. "Not yet. Michael, I'd like to meet in person. There are things you need to know." He scoffed. "I know everything I need to know. You were never there for us, and now you're running away instead of dealing with your problems." I closed my eyes. "That's not what happened." "Then explain it," he challenged. "Come on, tell me I'm wrong." But I couldn't explain it over the phone, not while he was this angry. "I'm here whenever you're ready to listen," I said quietly. He hung up. The divorce moved forward with mechanical efficiency. Mr. Foster presented our asset division proposal. I kept my full pension and retirement accounts. Denise got the house but had to refinance it in her name alone. She fought it initially, demanding half of everything. Then Mr. Foster submitted the evidence of her affair and parental alienation. Her lawyer advised her to accept the deal. Around this time, I heard through Rachel that things between Denise and Kent were deteriorating. Turned out Kent had been going through his own messy divorce, paying child support for 3 kids. He presented himself as financially stable, but reality was different. The life Denise had imagined with him was collapsing under the weight of his actual circumstances. She traded a marriage to a man who provided everything for an affair with someone who could barely support himself. I felt no satisfaction in that, just a dull recognition that betrayal rarely led to happy endings. She'd made her choices. Now she was living with them. Carmen approached me one morning with an unusual request. "There's a local journalist doing a story on community support programs. She wants to interview some of our volunteers. Would you be willing to talk to her?" I hesitated. I'd never been comfortable with attention. But Carmen had given me purpose when I needed it most. I owed her this. "Sure," I said. "What'd I talk about?" She smiled. "Just your experience here. Why you volunteer, what it means to you." The journalist, a woman named Victoria, showed up 2 days later with a camera operator. She asked about my background, my retirement, why I'd chosen to volunteer. I told her about understanding what it felt like to lose your identity when work disappeared. I talked about the people I'd helped and how they'd helped me in return. I didn't mention Denise or Michael or any of the personal wreckage. This wasn't about them. It was about finding meaning after everything fell apart. She seemed moved by it. "This is exactly the kind of story people need to hear," she said. I forgot about the interview until Carmen called me 3 weeks later. "Troy, turn on Channel 7. You're on the morning news." I was making coffee in my small apartment kitchen. I turned on the TV, and there I was, talking about the center, about helping people rebuild their lives. The segment was titled, "Former Retiree Helps Others Find Purpose After Job Loss." They'd edited it beautifully, capturing the emotion without making it sentimental. They showed me working with Marcus and Glenda, talking them through their fears. They filmed me explaining to a younger woman why her factory experience translated to management skills. I looked different on screen than I felt inside. I looked kind, patient, present. The person I'd always tried to be, but never quite managed with my own family. The segment ended with me saying, "Everyone deserves a second chance to find out who they are beyond their job title." The anchor praised the center's work and encouraged viewers to support local job programs. Then they moved to the next story. Michael saw it. I didn't know right away, but Rachel called that afternoon. "Troy, Michael just texted me. He saw you on the news this morning." My heart jumped. "What did he say?" She paused. "He said he didn't recognize you. Not physically, but the way you were talking, the way you were with those people. He said you seemed like a completely different person than the dad he remembers." I didn't know how to interpret that. "Is that good or bad?" Rachel sighed. "I think it confused him, Troy. His mom has spent years telling him you're selfish and absent. But the man on TV was compassionate, engaged, fully present. It doesn't match the story he's been told. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Not that everything would magically fix itself, but that maybe Michael was starting to question the narrative. Maybe he was finally ready to hear the truth. "Did he say anything else?" I asked. "He asked for your address," Rachel said. "I gave it to him." Michael showed up at my apartment 2 days later. I opened the door and barely recognized him. He'd grown a beard, gained weight. He looked tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. We sat across from each other in my small living room, the silence heavy between us. Finally he spoke. "Mom said you left because you didn't care about us anymore." I waited, letting him continue. "But that guy on TV, that wasn't someone who doesn't care. That was someone who actually gives a damn about people." I chose my words carefully. "I've always cared, Michael. I just didn't know how to show it in ways that mattered to you." He looked at his hands. "Mom told me you chose work over me my whole life. That you never wanted to be a father." I felt my chest tighten. "That's not true. I worked to provide for you. I thought that was what good fathers did." He met my eyes. "Why didn't you ever tell me that?" I tried. "But your mother controlled every conversation we had. By the time you were old enough to hear me directly, you'd already decided who I was." I showed Michael everything. The phone records, the credit card statements, the timeline of Denise's affair with Kent. I explained how she'd systematically turned him against me while building a life with another man. He sat there absorbing it, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, devastation. "She lied to me," he whispered finally. "About everything." I nodded. "She did. But I'm not telling you this to make you hate her. I'm telling you because you deserve the truth." He started crying then, not loud or dramatic, just quiet tears of someone whose entire understanding of their childhood was being rewritten. "I blocked you because she said you didn't want to talk to me," he admitted. "She said you'd retired so you could finally be free of us." The manipulation was even deeper than I'd known. We sat together for hours, going through memories, correcting the narrative she'd built. It wasn't comfortable. He had to face that his mother had weaponized him against me for years. But it was necessary. Meanwhile, Denise and Kent's relationship had completely fallen apart. The house was in foreclosure because she couldn't afford the refinance mortgage alone. Michael and I started meeting weekly. Not to fix everything overnight, but to build something real from the ruins. We went to therapy together, a neutral space where we could talk through the years of damage without either of us getting defensive. It was hard work, harder than any shift I'd ever worked at the plant. Some sessions left us both exhausted and frustrated. But slowly, carefully, we started understanding each other. He told me about the loneliness he'd felt as a kid, how he interpreted my absence as rejection. I explained the pressure I'd felt to provide, how I'd measured love in paychecks and stability rather than presence. We were learning each other's language finally, without Denise translating between us. I kept volunteering at the center. The work still mattered, maybe more now that I understood how many people were silently struggling. Michael even joined me one Saturday, helping a recently laid-off father prepare for interviews. Watching my son help someone else's dad find hope was strange and healing at the same time. I never got revenge on Denise. I didn't need to. She lost Kent, lost financial security, lost the respect of people who'd known our family for years. I got something better. I got myself back. And slowly, painfully, honestly, I was getting my son back too.